I want to welcome you to the Friday afternoon Sex and Healing Relationship Interactive Prodependence webinar. So please ask questions, even though it may not relate to the topic that we're going to talk about today. Today's topic is, again, something that shows up in my individual therapy sessions with clients as well as within my healing group. Today, we're going to talk about choosing yourself, and this is in regards to the betrayed partner. Sometimes the betrayed partner accidentally and not intentionally may find themselves focusing outward on their addict partner's recovery as opposed to focusing on their own. So today we're going to talk about how that presents in my office. I'm going to also talk to you about some of the reasons why the betrayed partner may do it. And then we're going to talk about ways that the betrayed partner can make a shift and begin to focus inward. So here's what shows up in my office and in group. Oftentimes I will have a betrayed partner who expresses the need and the desire to have their addict partner take full accountability for the pain that they've experienced as a result of the addict partner's betrayal. The interesting thing about this is the betrayed partner may have the need for this shift and change and go all over the place. So it's almost like a moving target at times. But the one thing they may want is that the betrayed partner wants to experience the addict partner feeling the same depth of pain and to then take accountability for all aspects of their betrayal trauma they're experiencing. Another way is that the betrayed partner feels more grounded and secure if they are part of the planning and the execution of the addict partner's recovery. So this is where I see the betrayed partner wanting to determine maybe who their therapist is and, how many minutes a day or hours a day they're actually working on their workbooks. So it shows up that way that they want to be very directive in formulating the recovery efforts of their addict partner. Another way is I have betrayed partners who come in and they tell me, I can't decide if I'm going to stay in the relationship or leave the relationship. It all depends on what I see my addict partner doing. So they're focusing on their addict partner and whether or not he or she is doing recovery as to determining what their next step is going to be. So it's very dependent upon what their addicted partner is doing. Another way is that the betrayed partner's emotional regulation is dependent upon how well the addict partner is progressing in their own recovery work. And so they have difficulties at times regulating their own emotions because they're not focusing on themselves. They're focusing outward on their addict partner. So as a recap regarding prodependence, when betrayed partners go into these types of behaviors, we do not consider it to be enabling. Instead, it's a partner who loves and cares about the addicted spouse or partner. And even though they care, they may not have the credentials, the expertise, the education to know exactly how to best help their loved ones. So oftentimes these behaviors they go into is really their best attempt to help and save their addicted partner. So we don't label or judge the betrayed partner for doing this. Instead, what we want to do is we want to start to identify those behaviors, the efforts that they are taking to try to save their loved ones and help them with that therapeutic approach through the prodependence lens to kind of shift their behaviors so it's more helpful. But I always keep in the back of my mind as I'm working with a betrayed partner that they are trying their best to survive and to help their family survive while experiencing extraordinary circumstances. So here is what outward focused recovery looks like for the betrayed partner. So number one, the betrayed partner feels like they need to focus on the addict partner's recovery. So they may do some safety-seeking behaviors to make sure that the addict partner is okay and they are doing okay. So it becomes the betrayed partner's goal to kind of join with the addict partner and to do their recovery together, the addict partner's recovery together. This puts an enormous amount of pressure on the betrayed partner to come up with solutions to restore the addict partner's sobriety, to help them come up with a plan, to help them maintain their sobriety, to keep the relationship together. They do this out of a fear that there's going to be disconnection, and ultimately they may lose their addict partner. They may lose the relationship. So oftentimes the betrayed partner feels responsible for everything that goes wrong in the relationship. And then likewise, they feel responsible for finding a solution. As you can imagine, this is very, very exhausting. So when I see a betrayed partner come into my office and they are working double time because they're focusing on their addict partner and their own recovery, we kind of analyze that and figure out some ways to take some steps back. Secondly, the addict partner obsessively focuses on enlightening the addict partner about how their addiction has caused the pain the betrayed partner is experiencing. So the betrayed partner finds that they are stuck and they can't move forward and feel okay until the addict partner gets it. Oftentimes, betrayed partners will express to me, I just need him to understand the pain I have. I need him to take accountability for it. He's not taking accountability for it. And then they can come up with a whole list of all the areas where they're not taking accountability that should be a part of their recovery. They want the addict partner to recognize, to apologize, to understand all aspects of what the betrayed partner is going through. Like I said earlier, unfortunately, it's a moving target at times because the betrayed partner who's in betrayal trauma has different needs at different times depending on what they're experiencing. Number 3, the betrayed partner becomes completely absorbed by the addict partner's struggles in recovery. With this, the betrayed partner starts focusing heavily on the actions they see their addict partner taking regarding their recovery efforts. So their emotional regulation will depend upon how well the addict partner is doing in their recovery. So if the addict partner struggles, betrayed partner struggles as well. So the betrayed experiences a lot of fear because their sense of safety, their sense of security is tied into how successful the addict is in doing their recovery. The unfortunate thing is that the betrayed partner begins to neglect their own needs and their own recovery efforts. And so it is almost like they get into a negative cycle with their partner that is very, very distressing. It's very exhausting for the betrayed partner. I see this show up in my group oftentimes, especially in the early days that the group members are in group, that they are very, very focused outward on making sure that their partners aren't struggling. And one of the goals in our betrayal recovery groups and our healing group is to help that betrayed partner get to that place where they can get on their own side of the street, so to speak, and let their partner who's got the addiction get on their side of the street, and each person can independently work their own recovery. At times, though, I tell my clients, we can be on both sides of, we can be on our own sides of the street, but there are times we might join in the middle of the street to work together on recovery. And the further we get into recovery, the goal is to start working on the partnership, but it takes individual recovery in the beginning to get some solid foundations going and some secure footing. Number 4, the betrayed partner doesn't hold healthy boundaries in place that support the addict partner becoming accountable. So again, the betrayed partner's lack of holding to and maintaining their boundaries comes from that place of fear, the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear of disconnection. So they're afraid that if they hold to their boundaries, that they may cause the addict partner to slip. They may cause the addict partner to want to stay in the relationship. So consequently, they back down. They allow the addict partner to participate in unacceptable behaviors at times, like blame shifting, manipulation, criticism, because of that fear that somehow they're going to do it wrong and that the boundary is going to create more problems than it will help. So again, the betrayed partner feels responsible for all the recovery efforts and does things for the addict partner that oftentimes they should be doing for themselves. So that's another way that they don't hold on to their boundaries. Okay, number 5, you offer as a betrayed partner constant advice on how the addict partner should do their recovery. So The betrayed partner will oftentimes express to me that they don't feel like their addict partner is doing enough for the recovery work or doing it the right way. So the betrayed partner might go to the addict partner and ask a lot of questions about what they're doing in group. What are you doing in your workbooks? And they might even keep a close eye on how often they see them doing their workbooks. An example that came into my office one time was a betrayed partner saying, my addict partner tells me he does all of his workbooks while he's at work, and I just don't believe it. And it caused a lot of distress for her. And I think she actually went to her addict partner and said, would you be willing to share some of your work with me? And she did that so she could see that he really was doing his work. And I understand that safety seeking. That's understandable because we want to know that we're in this together. And we want to know that the addict partner really cares about us as a betrayed partner and cares enough to do their own recovery. The problem with being the one who constantly gives advice to the addict partner is it sets up the betrayed partner in a parental role. And it shifts the dynamics in the relationship, and it does become unhealthy. And oftentimes it's exhausting to the betrayed partner because they feel like they're having to tell the addict partner everything to do. So that's one of the dynamics that we want to work on shifting out of and implementing some healthier ways to approach, maybe making vulnerable requests or asking if their addict partners are open to feedback. What's going to happen though is if the betrayed partner continues to offer advice and tell the addict partner how they need to be doing recovery, is that the addict partner will end up becoming very defensive. And so once again, we get back into a negative cycle that we want to hopefully stay out of because we want to keep that connection going. Okay, number 6, the betrayed partner uses guilt and shame to control their addict partner. I see this oftentimes when the betrayed partner is experiencing crisis, so in the early days of discovery and disclosure. So they use the shame and the guilt as a way at times to create safety by controlling and manipulating, by getting the addict partner to agree to do what you need them to do to feel safe. They want things to have a certain outcome. And again, oftentimes I see this happening when the betrayed partner is experiencing crisis. So they will play on their partner's emotions using guilt and shame in order to get them to maybe be accountable, to agree to go to therapy, to sign up for some type of maybe even going to 12-step and how often they need to go. So this, again, is another thing that is going to create more disconnection in a relationship between a betrayed partner and an addict partner. And then the last thing, number 7, is you as a betrayed partner see yourself as a perpetual victim. So because we as betrayed partners oftentimes feel powerless and incapable, it's very normal to feel that way, but we may find ourselves slipping into that role of feeling like we are a victim. So we want the addict partner to rescue us, to caretake us, and to help us to feel better, to help us to heal. The problem is it puts the responsibility on the addict partner for your recovery as a betrayed partner. So I'll hear betrayed partners say things like, he caused this, so he needs to fix this. Or you did this to me, so you need to make it right. So the betrayed partner feels oftentimes when they're a victim like the addict partner has completely destroyed their lives, they're picking on them. And when you're in that victim mentality, you actually step out of your own power as a betrayed partner. And you aren't able to be empowered to move forward in your life and do the healing you need to do. When you're a victim, it can also sabotage some of the efforts that the addict partner makes to help because they can never do anything right. And sometimes the betrayed partner will even act like a martyr. And it's true, they are experiencing pain. They are experiencing, the consequences of their addict partners acting out behaviors. And so it's true, you do have that betrayal trauma as a result, but it's very important that we are very clear on where you stand in that. And that's one of the things we work on healing, because in the early days in crisis, oftentimes you do feel like a victim. So let's talk about what we can do to focus inward on our recovery. So we're going to talk about how you can recognize when you're focusing outward and the steps to take to kind of shift it. It's not easy, but it's really a necessary step. I find that the women in my healing group who have been in recovery, most of them anywhere from 3 to 4 months, I see them starting to make this shift, and it's very empowering when they do. It's almost like I see this burden lifted, this weight lifted off of their shoulders. They are able to, at that point, kind of face their fears in this process and to learn how to manage them in a healthier, more productive way. This is when I see them finally recognizing that they only have control and power over themselves and how they're going to be doing their healing. So the first thing they have to do is to make the intentional choice to focus on their own recovery. So we use the analogy, and oftentimes we hear this in the recovery world, that you've got to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help other people. And that's really, really important. So to refocus, some of the ways to do that is you've got to gain the knowledge about betrayal trauma. And of course, I believe in doing that through the Prodependence lens and understanding what you're experiencing is a part of the betrayal trauma, maybe what you're doing and what the process is for recovery. So you're going to need a qualified therapist to help you with this. So oftentimes with my betrayed partners, we work on putting boundaries into place. We call these internal boundaries, the framework that we set in place for ourselves to follow so that we can create safety in the recovery process, not only for ourselves, but also for the addict partner. So when we lose focus at times on our own recovery and we want to focus on the addict partner's recovery, we can recognize it and automatically know what we need to do. We choose not to focus on it. We choose to focus inward. I love letting go. That's one of the things we teach in our healing group, that daily process of surrendering and letting go. For my clients who really struggle with this, I will challenge them to turn to the serenity prayer, or I will challenge them to create their own version of a serenity prayer, or an affirmation statement that reminds them that they only have control over themselves, and to have the wisdom and knowledge to know what it is they have control over. The other thing that I work with my clients on in this intentional choice to focus on your own recovery is to choose to live in the moment. When we are in betrayal, it's common and it's normal to want to focus on the past and to really ruminate and have our thoughts go there and settle there. We like to go down the rabbit holes of the past to try to analyze and figure out why this has happened to us, as well as projecting into the future to try to figure out all the worst case scenarios and how we could possibly deal with it and manage it. The problem is it's really difficult to do your own recovery when you're in the past or you're projected into the future. So it's important that you work each and every day as best you can to stay in the moment. So that requires a lot of thought stopping. It requires a lot of what you need to do when you commit to your own healing, which is the second step. And that is truly committing to wanting to recover and to doing the work necessary to heal. So recovery is a daily choice. And sometimes I do have betrayed partners who come in and they've told me, I chose not to do recovery. So of course we discuss how that went for them and what the results were. And oftentimes they recognize that the day was much more difficult and things were not nearly as enjoyable for them. And there was a lot more struggle in the day. The only person who is responsible for healing you is you. And I know that's a hard shift to make when you've been hurt by somebody else, because we do want that other person to help us heal. And that will come down the road, but it's really important that you focus on you first. One of the ways to do that, like I've said, is to begin to learn about betrayal trauma, to recognize how it's showing up in you, to figuring out how to heal it, the steps to take. There's so much wonderful information out there. You can go to Sex and Healing Relationship. You can go to a variety of really well done Prodependence based podcasts. There's some wonderful books out there on healing betrayal trauma. So gain some knowledge so you know what it is you're going to be doing in your healing journey. The other thing I like my clients to do is to verbalize to other people that they are focusing on their own recovery, so that they're almost like their accountability partners. So it could be anyone from a trusted friend to somebody in group to even your individual therapist, even your group leader who's running your group. They're going to focus on your own recovery and not your partner's. Again, we're going to talk about going to counseling again. We're on repeat on that, but finding the qualified therapist, getting into a healing group, that's part of the commitment of your own healing journey. And then you have to do it consistently. It's going to be difficult at times, and our brain doesn't like us to experience difficult things and hard emotions. It feels at times like physical pain in our body. So in a way, we want to resist doing some of these hard things. So that's why commitment to focus on your own recovery is so important. Then the next step is you have to really focus on your daily recovery opportunities. I call these routines and rituals that you put in place in your life that you do again and again and again. I like to focus on 3 areas with my clients that they use foundationally. The first one is that part of their daily recovery opportunities is that they have healthy human support and connection. I find that this increases that narrow capacity, that narrow window of tolerance quicker than anything. But you need to make sure that you identify people who can give you that healthy support. It could be a trusted friend, family member. It could be somebody who's gone through betrayal that recognizes, the importance of doing recovery, on your own for yourself rather, and that can be there to have empathy for you and to, like I would have somebody who gave me some really good, solid, sound advice. So they were the people that she was the person I turned to for that type of a help. The other thing I talk about that's foundational is you've got to do self-care. So we do that through the dailies. Those 4 areas in your life where challenge my clients, you've got to focus on at least 2 items of behavior that you're going to participate in each of these 4 areas. That would be physical, to support your physical body, spiritual. I say that that's either to support your connection to higher power or that connection to your spiritual part of you. Your emotional aspects, and we tie that into a lot of good self-care. What do I need in this moment to help me with my emotions, to help me feel more grounded and stable? And then lastly, relationally. And then the third part is that mindfulness piece, getting back into your body, focusing on mindfulness exercises, going out and do meditation walks, journaling to get us back into the present moment and into the here and now. When my clients come in and they are struggling in recovery, I always go back to those 3 things and ask them, are you reaching out to other people for healthy human connection? Are you doing your dailies? Are you doing what you need to do to get back into your body and live in the present moment? And every time they tell me no, that they've kind of somehow fallen out of their routines and their rituals. So this is very, very important that every day you do whatever you can to take the time to do your recovery work. Then the other thing I like is to put together a recovery team. I like the concept of having people I can go to. So like we said, you want to have a professional who can guide you, somebody who is trained in understanding betrayal trauma, understanding prodependence, and we want to make sure they're qualified. You want to work with somebody who understands betrayal trauma because it is different. It is different than some of the other aspects of trauma. Although trauma is trauma, there are some things that are unique to this betrayal relational trauma. Like I said earlier, you want to identify and reach out to those supportive, empathetic, self-compassionate friends. We all need a support network. And then connecting with other women who've experienced betrayal trauma, who have done their healing, who can provide hope to you. Very, very important. Last night, I just finished working with a group of women who started phase 1 in our program, which is our sex addiction betrayal recovery program. And over the 4 weeks that we met, it was amazing for me to see the shift and the change in these women, because they were part of this group of women who were supportive, who understood betrayal, who could relate, who had empathy, who had vulnerability. It was just amazing to me to see the growth in 4 short weeks. So I can't say enough how important having people there for you is. I know oftentimes when we experience betrayal trauma, what we want to do is pull inward and not talk to anybody, not even go outside of our house. But your healing, your recovery work is going to be so much quicker, and there's going to be less struggle when you have other people there with you. And that kind of leads into creating a community of support. So we've got to have the right support. Sometimes that means that we can't turn to those that we want to turn to, and we have to find those that are safe and who will validate our experiences, and people that we can start to learn to redevelop and trust. Because when our partner has betrayed our trust, sometimes that kind of bleeds out into other areas of our lives, and we don't trust anybody. We don't even trust ourselves. So finding that community of support. I love things like the betrayal trauma recovery programs that are out there. I love the Prodependence Anonymous 12-step programs for partners. I love the Sex and Healing Relationship drop-in groups and webinars in some of their healing groups. There is such a great community out there. And the more you can get out there and learn and be supported, again, it keeps you focused on your own recovery. So I hope this is helpful in recognizing if you need to kind of readjust and kind of take the focus on your addict partner's recovery efforts and their healing, and kind of shift it back to you. What I find with my group members and my clients that get to that point where they recognize that they have no power, they have no control over whether or not their addict partner gets it, whether they choose to do recovery or not. It is such an empowering moment. There is such a lifting of a burden. I see a real, even a physical shift in the betrayed partners, because they feel more secure in themselves. They know that they've got skills and tools. They know they've got a network to fall back on. And for me, as a therapist guiding them through this experience, it's very rewarding to see that. So I hope this will help some of you out there that see this.
Thank you so much, Debbie. If anybody has questions, type them into the Q&A feature. I have a couple, but I mean, you crawled into my head today. I've been dealing with this all day, but on the other side of the fence, because Debbie mostly works with betrayed partners. I mostly deal with addicts. I have my porn addiction work group. We have an online work group this morning, and I'm trying to teach them about arousal templates, and all they wanted to talk about was their wives, and their wives doing a lot of the things that Debbie mentioned in the beginning of this, being overly directive and trying to educate the addict about the addict's problem, and trying to control the recovery, and always wanted to know, what they're doing, when they're doing it, the not sticking with boundaries you mentioned, setting a healthy boundary, but then not sticking to it. It's confusing to the addict. One of the questions that came up is, my wife wants to see my workbook for this course. And I'm like, okay, here are the things you show your wife from your workbook. You show her your circle plan, which is the plan for sobriety, and you get some feedback. And when we work on boundaries, you get to discuss that with her, see what she wants as boundaries, what you want as boundaries, maybe read some, boundaries are singular. I mean, they don't need the other person's permission, but sometimes it's nice to let them know what your boundaries are and what you'd like them to be, and everything else is for you. This is your personal work, and it is not ready for public consumption. Save it for couples therapy or whatever. But a lot of times betrayed partners, they want to see everything, and they want to see it right now, and they want to know everything, and they want to know it right now, and they want you to do this, 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 and this, and this, and they want you to do it yesterday, not today, not tomorrow. They want to, and you use the word defensive, and the guys get insanely defensive, because they feel like a little kid again. And you said it puts the betrayed partner in the parental role. And these guys will come to me and say, God, she's turned into my mother, and I didn't like my mother, you know? And I'm like, okay, you're going to have to work on this, you know, and I coach them to say, I understand you're upset. I know it's because of my behavior. Here are the things I'm doing to work on it. But, you know, in the heat of the moment, they really struggle with that. And the guilt and shame, control, you know, and making the addict responsible for the betrayed partner's well-being. You know, I always tell the addicts when they start to do that, I'm like, you cannot fix your partner's emotions, or you can't get her off the emotional roller coaster she's on. It's her journey. Your job is to keep your side of the street clean and deal with your own emotions. Your job is to stay sober, be rigorously honest, you know, keep your commitments, do what you say you're going to do, give a full disclosure when the time is right in a therapeutic setting with therapists there. You know, I tell them what their job is, but they want to control the betrayed partners just as much as the betrayed partners want to control them. They want her to be happy. They want her to stop crying. They want her to stop, you know, stop yelling at them. And guys, you can't do that. If she's crying, it's because she needs to cry. If she's trying to control you, it's because she feels unsafe. You know, what you can do is help her feel safe by not acting out and becoming honest. And it's interesting because the advice you gave in the second part of this is the same advice I give my guys. Choose to focus on your own recovery. You know, I even use the oxygen mask analogy on the plane. Put yours on first. You can't help it. You are no good for anyone if you are not taking care of yourself first. You know, living in the moment. I talk about the wreckage of the past and the wreckage of the future. And, you know, with the man, I can say, if you got 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the future, where are you going to get kicked? And they get that. You know, commit to your own recovery. Only you can heal you. As much as your wife wants you to get well, she can't do it for you. She may even find herself trying to do it for you, but she can't. You have to do it. And she'll probably keep trying until you show her that you're taking the wheel. Like, I am doing this. I'm going to do this. And even then, she might continue trying a little bit because she's hurt and feels unsafe. I mean, these behaviors you mentioned are all natural reactions for a betrayed partner. I mean, how could you not engage in these, at least to a certain extent? You know, and then routines and rituals and, you know, human support. I mean, I tell the guys, this is your #1 weapon in recovery. And they start to use it after a while. I make my work groups, I make them have a phone list and I assign them, you have to make a call. The first week, you have to make 1 call. Second week, you have to make 2, you know, until we get them making calls. And self-care and mindfulness, all of this, and then having a team, a support team, a network. Yeah, I could can this, change a few words, and give the same lecture to the addicts, because and I think this goes for any person that's struggling with anything. I mean, you know, choose to focus on your own recovery, stay in the moment, you know, get some support, you know, do, you know, self-care, all of this stuff. It's just amazing, and I love hearing it from the other side of the coin, because I'm so often mired in the muck with the addicts, and trying to help them pull themselves out of it. You see, even I'm like trying to fix them, and I can't. So that's wonderful. So one of the questions I had, and we'll get to we got a couple in the Q&A, is these unhealthy behaviors. Are they healthy to a point, and then they become unhealthy? Is it like a character defect that is, you know, like I'm stubborn, which is good to a point, and then it becomes really not so good? Things like this, needing to control and be directive, is that good to a point?
You know, I'd have to say in some of those, you know, behaviors I talked about, I think they can be. I think in the early days, it's, like you said, a very natural reaction to a very difficult situation. The betrayed partner's going into some safety-seeking behaviors. The problem is when it gets to that point where it's creating problems, where there's arguing, where there's that disconnection, it's doing the opposite of what you want it to do. So rather than creating safety and security and connection, we're having more and more disconnection. I know that what we're dealing with too, and you can speak to this as well, is, and I teach my betrayed partners this, is you've got to realize that the addict is working on their own particular things. Like they've got denial and they're still trying to break through the denial. And sometimes their denial creates resistance and it makes them unaware, and they're more defensive because they're also dealing with shame. So they're going back and forth between, denial and shame, and sometimes they're not going to get it. And so when it starts to really create more disconnection, also when it's creating more dysregulation in the betrayed partner, that's another time that I will just gently guide them through, is this working? How do you believe it's working? How's it not working? Okay, there's some other ways we could do that. If they have no idea, then I might say, well, are you open to maybe just discussing a few ideas and how this might work? And so we'll start to kind of problem solve. Can we just a little bit at a time step out of maybe some of those behaviors that worked for you at first, but they're no longer working? So I think it's true. There are some things that you go into that are helpful in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think about like really early recovery, particularly with substance abuse, because I deal with substance abusers too sometimes. Sometimes they're literally not capable of making a good decision about getting a therapist or going to treatment, or if it's a parent-child relationship, like an actual parent-child relationship, not one of these that we were just talking about. Sometimes you have to make decisions for your children because they won't or can't. So there are times where, the prodependent thing to do is to step in. But when the addict is capable of making good decisions and capable of recovering on his or her own, I think it's, we need to like weigh, am I doing what they could and should be doing for themselves?
Mhm.
So thank you for addressing that. The other one, you mentioned denial. One of the issues that I see, and again, from the addict end, is she wants to know everything. She wants to know it now. And you keep telling me, wait for disclosure. and since this is mostly attended by and watched by betrayed partners on the YouTube channel, here's the reason I say this, and I want your opinion on it too, please, is addicts come into recovery and they are deep in denial and they are deep in shame and they have compartmentalized everything. Mm-hmm. And they can't give you a full disclosure until they break through the denial, until they battle the shame a little bit, until they unlock those little Pandora's boxes in their brain. They don't even, they literally don't remember some of the things they've done. And then they come to a group with me or somebody, and somebody else shares about something and they're like, oh my God, I did that too. I can't tell you how often that happens in a group of guys. They're like, oh my God, I forgot I did that. So usually 3 to 6 months, there's enough progress where the addict can actually give you a very complete, although not always complete. Sometimes they have to come back and amend it, even if they pass a polygraph, because they literally remembered something after the disclosure. So what is your opinion on that? I mean, and how can you tell betrayed partners, if he says he's going to give you a disclosure, get a date and wait for it? I mean, how do you get betrayed partners to say, okay, or can you?
Actually, so far, so good. I've been successful in it. Good. Because I try to help them understand the process from their angle and what I see. And by that time, I've hopefully established some trust with them. So we can talk about the fact that, if we're trying to do an interrogation disclosure, or we've got death by 1,000 cuts disclosure, because you're getting a little bit here, a little bit there. We talk about how it throws them off and gets them dysregulated. And it's so hard to get back regulated again. And I know repeatedly I hear, I want disclosure as soon as possible. I want it now. I can't move on until I have disclosure. And I recognize that that's a real need and that I understand why they feel that way. However, I talked about the fact that we want you to be in a place where you can sit in a disclosure and stay regulated. If you don't have that ability, and it takes a while to gather and gain those skills and tools and to find what works for you. And so we've got to work on getting you there so that while you're in disclosure, you can stay regulated and you have the skills and tools post disclosure. I also talk to them about just what you said. I educate them about what the process is for the addict partner, that, you know, they're just breaking through denial and they're trying to figure it out and they've got to work on it. We do have them work through a workbook, so that really helps. So that if my betrayed partner wants to start working on disclosure, I'll give them the workbook. Let's start working on that now. Let's get you prepared, because we've got to come up with a self-care plan. We've got to work on questions, right? We've got to kind of go through and educate the betrayed partner on the actual steps and how, you know, a therapeutic formal disclosure is done. So I can typically get them. I know I had one who was a client of mine who just finished this group I mentioned last night. And at one point she turned to me and she goes, I know, Debbie, you told me I can't have a disclosure yet. And I know why, you know, so she got it. She got it in her individual sessions. And I know that's hard. I know they want to know, but I ask them to trust me and trust the process, because the last thing I want is them to go into a disclosure and have it blow up and be such an awful experience that then we have to go back in and do it again, because it's hard enough to do disclosure once. So I hope that answered your question.
It did beautifully, because, you know, I know this from the addict side. I know why they can't give it yet, but betrayed partners, I mean, to hear that they also need to wait while they develop some of these tools, you know, get their human support and connection, get their self-care down, you know, learn to be mindful so that they can, you know, regulate in a painful moment. Because disclosure is a series of painful, it's about 2 hours of painful moments, you know, and that's just the start. You know, it is a process, not an event. You know, so yeah, I learned something. Thank you. Let's jump into the Q&A here. First question regarding a polygraph. Can you explain how or why an answer would be scored inconclusive?
Well, I am not a polygrapher, so all I can say to this is, if you've experienced that, I imagine that is very activating, as we call it. I imagine that it has rocked your world a little bit. And I would refer you back to the polygrapher. I know that we do polygraphs where I'm at. Not all agencies or practices do. We have a very highly qualified, highly trained, highly vetted polygrapher. So I don't know who you went to for your polygraph, because that makes a difference. That could be one of the reasons why it's inconclusive. You may not have somebody who's, you know, got the expert knowledge or the skill set on that. What I also like about our polygrapher is he talks to the betrayed partners. They can ask him any questions. They can share with him what they need to know. And then if they need to talk to him post polygraph, he's available for that too. So I love that. There are so many factors as to why something could be scored inconclusive. It could be the way the question was asked. It could be the physical, emotional state of the person who is being polygraphed. So there are a variety of different reasons for it to be inconclusive. Again, I would refer you back to the polygrapher. That's what I would have my clients do. And if they needed me to be part of that process, I'd be happy to help them with that. And we could kind of formulate, you know, questions to ask. And if they even needed me to be there, you know, when they took the call, I'd be happy to do that as well.
Yeah. I love the process you have with your polygrapher, because this is what a good polygrapher does. He or she talks to the people in advance to find out what we're looking for. And then, you know, in the polygraph, there are very few questions. You know, there are the questions that set the baseline readings of this is honest, this is not honest. And then they're like, did you tell the truth to the best of your ability in your disclosure? And the answer is either yes or no. And it's pretty, you know, if you've got an inconclusive answer from that, that's just weird. Normally a straightforward question like that, and, you know, from a polygrapher who knows what to look for, it's not going to be inconclusive. So yeah, like Debbie, I would refer you back to the polygrapher and find out maybe what went wrong. Because a good polygrapher almost never has inconclusive. Um, you know, so at least as far as I know, and I talk to a lot of people. So
Well, and our polygrapher is even called or requested to talk to me before he's in a polygraph, which is, I think, really incredible that there's an open line of communication. So again,
yeah, that's the way it should be.
important you choose.
Definitely. Okay, hi, thanks so much for this. My question. I sought support from my sister and that has backfired. I told her everything, thinking she would be great support. My partner and I are reconciling. He is 5 months into recovery. We're in couples counseling with the CSAT. My relationship with my sister, however, is destroyed. She will never forgive my partner and accuses me of being manipulated. This invalidates the work I have done and the work my partner has done. Any advice for when you choose the wrong support?
That happens. That is just a reality of recovery. And it's really hard when you go to somebody that in the past has been your support and they react the way you do. It's almost like another betrayal. So when I work with my clients, we process that it feels like another betrayal. This is somebody that, because you are actually related, and I'm assuming they have been there in the past to support you, and they aren't, it's very painful. So recognize that you may be going back into some of your betrayal trauma. So that's why it feels, so devastating and it feels so overwhelming. I have found that you almost need to take that. I tell my clients, can we just take that and put that on the back burner for now? We process in the moment, the hurt, the pain, but down the road, I have seen sometimes people shift and change as they see you working your recovery, your partner working his recovery. They too have lost trust in your partner. And sometimes people will see the work that you do and they start to soften, and they're not as harsh. That's a very difficult situation. And for you, really, if working with your therapist, process through those feelings of invalidation and do the reset so you can get back to recognizing that the work you have done has really been wonderful work. Also, if you can find someone else who is there for you, who does support you, who does validate you, that also helps in the repair process for you as well. If your sister was the only person that you were turning to for support, or you were hoping to turn to for support, I challenge you to expand that. And I think, that would be how I would, approach it with one of my clients if they had to deal with this. And I have had this happen.
Yeah. Hi, Debbie. Thanks for holding these webinars. A lot of great words that I saw in myself, especially regarding victim mentality. I'm not super proud of it, but I've definitely caught myself telling my addict partner that he owes me recovery for all the trauma his acting out has caused. I'm working at lifting myself out of this victim mentality, but I'm really struggling with it. Speaking of committing to my recovery, made a light bulb turn on for me. My partner and I have been on our roads of recovery since early January, and I've reached a point where I have stretches of time where I feel I'm doing well and healing, only to trip into a pit and get stuck. I'm back to feeling victimized and telling my addict partner that he owes me recovery. It's hard for me to stand up and recommit to my recovery. How can I more efficiently recommit to my healing instead of being complacent in suffering? What a great question.
That's a great question. Okay, I'm going to tell you what I would have my client do. We have something that we work on in individual therapy and in group. We call it our shame prevention sheet. It's kind of equivalent to a relapse prevention sheet that the addicts use. And in this, we want to kind of dig a little deeper as to what's going on. So, you do well for a while and then you go back into the pit and you become a victim again. So what you're going to do is you're going to start to be aware of the situations that occur where you get activated or triggered, meaning I'm going limbic. I am going into some really intense, distressing emotions. So it's going to be grief, sadness, anger, fear, right? And then you're going to identify what is that shame-based belief that is getting triggered in me. And it's usually going to be, I'm not enough, right? I'm not worth him being recovered. He'll never love me the way I should be loved. So really identify, what is that kind of overarching negative belief that you have. So a negative belief, how I explain that to my clients, is kind of the operating wiring in your brain. It's like your operating system. Your brain's a computer, actually. And so when situations come along, we've stored data in our brain. So when something similar comes along, then we go right to that same area in our brain and we start operating out of that area. So if it's I'm not important, I'm not lovable, I am not worth it, all of those kind of beliefs, our brain starts going there. And we go into thinking. So then the next step is to list all of your critical thoughts around the fact that you're a victim. After you've exhausted and gotten all those critical thoughts out of your head, now you're going to go back to each critical thought and you're going to reframe it. You're going to redo it with compassion. So you're going to use self-compassion. So it might be, I know my husband loves me because he's doing recovery. And it's okay that at times I struggle in feeling like it's ever going to get better. However you want to reframe it. It's a really great way because when we go into victim mentality, we have that supporting thought process. Our thoughts support it. So if we can identify also what that negative belief is, we can start reframing it in a positive way. So we're actually working on creating new wiring in your brain. It takes work. So if you can recognize, again, triggering events that take you into the difficult emotions, that take you into the negative belief, that support all of your victim mentality thoughts, and just do a lot of journaling. I think that's one way for you to process through it and to be able to recommit to your own recovery. The more you do that, the quicker you're going to be able to catch it. You don't have to write it down every time. Now when I have something like that come up, I can just kind of identify, I just go down the list and I've shifted and I'm out of that victim mentality.
Yeah, I think that's a great tactic. And by the way, addicts have to rewire their brains too when they get triggered, because that trigger will take them straight to addiction. We have to create new neural pathways so that it'll take us to recovery or something else. In addition to Debbie's suggestion, I'm a big fan of just a straight up 10-item gratitude list. When I'm down, I do not do well. And then I'll just do a gratitude list and it kind of snaps me out of it a lot of times. And it's a very quick and simple thing. I can kind of do it anywhere. So yeah.
Well, and one of the tasks, we just talked about this in our group last night, of when we are a victim, one of the things that we have to do is we have to, because we're really telling ourselves we have no power over the situation, and that is to really identify, what do I have power and control over? Right. And it's going to be in regards to yourself. So what am I responsible for doing? What do I need to do in this moment? So that's another thing that I will work with betrayed partners on too.
Yeah. I'm going to skip this one because it goes back to the polygraph question. There are 3 questions. He passed the other 2. The question that he did that was inconclusive: had you had sex of any kind with another person since marriage other than your wife? And that's a terrible question. I'm sorry. It's an awful question. Sex of any kind. Does this include masturbation? Another person? Does that include myself? What about webcam? I mean, it's just very nebulous. It's not I wouldn't know how to answer that question either. Do you agree, Debbie?
I absolutely agree.
Okay. I mean, I don't want to.
Yeah, that's not how I see our question
but
worded.
that's not a good question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Last one here. Can you describe how, as a betrayed partner, after 17 years being with my sex addict husband, how after what I believe to be my true life, how do I stay on my own side of the street while I'm living at home with my addicted husband, who is in early recovery with no disclosure yet? How am I expected to live in this limbo? How do I focus on myself when he is here every day, still in denial, but starting to do the work? Do I just disconnect? And how do I manage his attempts to connect then? Great stuff today.
That is really a great question. This shows up a lot in my office because I just focus on safety. Right now, your sex addict husband is not a safe person. So how can we create safety as you are trying to get your feet on the ground again to start to, work your own recovery. Some of my partners in doing this, just recognize that sometimes it's hard not to stand your own side of the street. Have a lot of self-compassion. You are going to make mistakes. And like my clients, they come in and they'll say, oh, Debbie, you're not going to like what I did. I did just the opposite. Somebody told me this a couple weeks ago. I did just the opposite of what you told me I should do. And you were right. It blew up. And I go, okay, so you chose to do that. What did you learn? So this is going to be a learning process, and there's going to be times where you're going to want to be on his side of the road and get off your own recovery path. Just ask him if you can. Just be open and honest and tell him, here's what I need. I love, and I've mentioned this before when you've been on, Scott, I love the talking boundary, where journal out and write out, here's what I'm seeing you do, here's what I'm hearing you say, here's the stories, my thoughts I'm going into, the stories I'm telling myself, and the emotions I have. And then the fourth step is to make that request or to put that boundary in place. Would you be willing to do a check-in every night and share this, this, and this with me? And I believe check-ins should be very brief, not hours at a time. It can cover things from one word to how you're feeling emotionally in this moment, and then it can be, what recovery work are you currently working on? Have you had any struggles with safety seeking or with any of your sexual acting out behaviors? It can be those types of things. It can be, sharing what you need from each other. And so kind of gradually consider working into something like that. If you're feeling like you need to create a little bit of separation and distance from him, verbalize it. I encourage my betrayed partners that you just don't do something and set a boundary without putting words to it. Let him know, I don't feel safe. What I need to do is I need to go over here for a bit and kind of work on me. There's going to be times when you ask me to do things to connect. If I can, I will. And if I can't, I'm going to tell you that as well. You've got to show up honestly and authentically. That's what you want your addict partner to do. It might be that you even choose to live in different parts of the house. So when you're asleep at night in a room, in bed by yourself, you feel safe. So if you can do everything under that umbrella of creating safety for your early days in recovery, so you have the emotional space, the physical space to start focusing on you and the healing work you need to do. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah. Thank you, Debbie, so much. Great webinar today. Thank you, everybody, for being here, for great questions. It was a small group, but mighty. We love that. I will get this posted online if anybody wants to revisit it. Probably this afternoon. I'm going to try. If not, I'll get it done tomorrow. Debbie will be back in 2 weeks. Yes. Okay.
Yeah, and in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about how the betrayed partner can fortify themselves for the holiday.
Ooh,
yeah,
good stuff. So we will see you soon, everyone. Have a
Thanks,
great
everybody.
weekend and be well.